The 28 Days Later trilogy, possibly the most iconic zombie film franchise out there, a statement that is very much up for debate. But to see how good it all really is, today I watched and ranked each and every one, so I'd strap in and get ready for some hot takes. Oof, this is a rough one. A part of me genuinely loves this film, and every time I think about it, I'm remembering it really fondly. But while watching it, I actively recall why it's the worst in the trilogy. I'm gonna preface this by saying the first 12 odd minutes of this are generational, like they're so peak. Now, I'm a huge fan of music and cinema, and I believe mediocre films can be made great simply with a strong soundtrack or an iconic needle drop. John Murphy's In the House in a Heartbeat, the unofficial theme for the series, is one of my favourite pieces of music just ever. I mean, for me, it's on par with something like Luxor Turner from Requiem for a Dream, or the Bond theme, or the outro music from The Raid, which are all just S-tier soundtracks. But that intro sequence, when Robert Carlyle's character jumps out of the window and he's running down the canal with the music just ripping through the screen, oh, it's honestly one of my favourite sequences ever. And it means you go into the rest of the runtime with really high hopes that are just shattered very quickly. I mean, I'm not trying to sound like a raging nationalist or anything, but this is just all way too American. 28 Days Later was a very, very British thing, and on a smaller budget with an iconically British cast, it just felt very rooted. As for 28 Weeks, it seems as though they really wanted to appeal to a more international audience, so they thought, what does the world want to see? The answer to that question being explosions, copious amounts of blood, and American people, which is fair enough to be honest.
We've lost control.
But it means there just doesn't seem to be any soul behind the story. It's all very Hollywood emotionless slop, to be honest. And it's partly because Jeremy Renner's here. No offense, Jeremy Renner. Love you, but don't love you that much. While the action is fast and it's bloody, it relies way too much on a ridiculously shaky camera and using cuts that are so fast it means you have no idea what's going on. While that strat does work well for mirroring the chaos in some scenes, most of the time it's just messy and generally crap. But take for example that sequence where the infected break into the enclosed parking lot. For me, that's the one scene that I thought deserved to move at 100 miles an hour with a ridiculously shaky cam. We, the audience, have absolutely no idea what we're seeing. All we know is that there's a loss of blood and a lot of panic, and that is just perfect. But the use of the shakes and the cuts in all these other scenes is just clearly them trying to make what is a relatively stale piece of action the slightest bit exciting. Like they're just running, okay? I don't need it to seem as if we're going through an earthquake. I get it. They're running. Obviously, I'll give it some slack for being made in 2007. Like, this is prime Jason Bourne shaky cam era, and that was just trendy at the time, but it is still just incredibly jarring to watch. As is the frankly awful use of CGI. The pitch for this film was clearly, let's turn a small-scale apocalypse into a massive-scale apocalypse. And for that massive scale, we're working with the entirety of London. And funny enough, okay, little spoiler alert here, firebombing a city in a lower-budget film is probably not gonna look very good. And it doesn't, at all. It's like someone just imported one of those sort of stock explosion things and just pasted it all along the streets. It looks incredibly bad. There's a lot more examples of dodgy effects in this, and I'm not going to go point them all out, but I think the scale that they wanted to depict and the stories they wanted to tell were all just a bit too ambitious for this type of project, and it really rubs off on the finished product. If you hadn't guessed it already by my mostly negative comments, I think the film as a whole is not the greatest. The more I'm talking, the more I'm realizing I have been very, very negative towards this, and the truth is I don't actually think it's that bad. For me, it's got a couple of scenes which are just very good, and it means every time I think back on this film, I remember it really, really fondly. They've got a couple good scares here and there, and I think the ending sequence in the tunnel is really, really well done. Doesn't make the most logical sense in the grand scheme of the plot, but it's very tense nonetheless. But honestly, it is that first 12 minutes that make the film. If you'd have cut out that canal sequence, this film would have been utterly tragic. It would have been tragically bad. But they haven't, so it's not. But quickly, before we get into the number 2, if you haven't already, then please subscribe to the channel. Only 1% of the people who watch these are actually subscribed, so if you like films and you'd like to hear what I have to say, then please click that button. 28 years later, more like took them 28 years to cook up this strangely good yet bad at the same time film. Oh, bruh. I'm not gonna lie, I had a really hard time deciding which of these two films would take the top spot, and unfortunately 28 years later has lost out. I really wanted to love this film, and since the trailer release, my expectations have been slowly building up. You know, I didn't manage to catch it in the cinemas, but when I recently got round to watching it, I was left a little disappointed. To start with a big plus, I do think the performances in this are the best I've seen from the series as a whole. While the other two films had actors that were clearly the weakest link, not gonna name and shame here, but you guys know who you are. Everyone in this is honestly really solid. As always, I love Aaron Taylor-Johnson, and Alfie Williams, the guy who plays Spike, is just class. As I understand, he hasn't had too many roles prior to this, but I honestly think he's been really underrated as rising child actors go. I mean, it is very much Owen Cooper's time to shine right now.
Look out! Fucking what does he do?
But let's give a little appreciation to the not quite BAFTA level, but still very good category of teen actors. My main gripe with 28 Years Later is the fact that it just seems a bit directionless. Obviously, as we all know, they're doing a whole 28 Years Later trilogy, with The Bone Temple coming out very soon, and since they filmed them back to back, we can assume it's going to be a direct sequel to 28 Years Later, and will hopefully be making the story a lot more fleshed out, you know, giving it a proper ending. Because what was that? But until we get a sequel, I can only judge it as it stands. And without its 1 to 2 follow-up films, 28 Years Later does just feel incomplete. You could argue that it's just like judging part 1 of The Deathly Hallows without watching part 2. And that would be a fair argument. But this is not 28 Years Later part 1, this is just 28 Years Later. It should at least hold up on its own. I do like the idea of this detached community on an island that ventures out for resources and that hunts the infected for trophy kills more than anything else. But as soon as the story started to stray away from this community, I found myself losing interest. The father-son bond between Jamie and Spike was a really realistic one, and once Spike detached from both this bond and the community as we knew it, it all just felt a bit rushed.
I said, watch your bloody mouth!
I would have definitely liked to see more depth in the politics of the community and just had a better insight into how it operated. For me, it was just a really interesting side to the story, a side that I'm hoping gets developed more with the sequels. Ralph Fiennes is looking like he's straight out of a shift at the Chocolate Factory, and he's owning that look. He plays the mysterious and slightly eccentric Doctor role to perfection. But as I said, while I really like all the characters, it's just what they're doing in the story that deters me. Without spoiling too much, although basically everyone knows about it, the ending is just so bizarre and out of place. After all of these really dark, emotionally driven scenes, we get this gang of Jimmy Savile lookalikes that cartoonishly beat up the infected using poles and stuff. It's so weird. The first 2 films both had great endings that left a really positive light on my opinions of them, and this was just so weird. If it was meant to drum up conspiracy online as a way to promote the film more, then it most definitely achieved its goal, but at the cost of completely destroying the atmosphere that it worked for the last hour and 45 to build up. But apart from that, I think, as always, the infected looked great. For obvious reasons, I can't really show much of them since they are just completely nude most of the time, and I don't want my channel getting taken down. But in this, they're extra disgusting, they're extra violent, and the big ones do this crazy thing where they like rip out a person's head along with their spine. I mean, it's ridiculous, and I don't even know if the human body works like that, but it is a spectacle nonetheless. Am I sad that we haven't got a single rendition of In the House in a Heartbeat? Yes. It would have genuinely elevated this film so much. You can find fan-made clips of the action sequences to the tune of In the House in a Heartbeat, and they are just made so much better. I'm convinced any film will be made better with that music. But as music type stuff goes, we do get Boots, which does come close to filling its predecessor's shoes. Or Boots. I'll stop. The song is a rendition of a 1903 poem by Rudyard Kipling, and that scene where they walk along the causeway to the rhythm of that marching beat is for me one of the best moments in the film. I mean, the 28 Days franchise just has goated music. And here we are. A while ago, I did make a video on 28 Days Later, so I'll be echoing some of the points made in that, along with some new and hopefully more relevant ones. This film is by no means perfect, and it has got its fair share of issues like the rest of them, but in my mind, this sits at the pinnacle of the zombie horror genre. Everything in this is just iconic, from the on-location shots of a deserted London, to the characters, the score, everything. It's got a clear low-budget vibe, most probably sprouting from the fact that it was filmed on an incredibly low budget, but it works. The low-definition look, along with the really grimy tone and an incredibly dank colour scheme, all aid in creating this really uncomfortable atmosphere. And thanks to this, a real lurking sense of unease is created, with some help from the claustrophobic close-ups and all of those tilted shots. Like, these angles are jarring. I've seen this film about 3 times now, and on my most recent rewatch, its Achilles heel was made painfully obvious. The pacing. It's just got a few bits where the flow of the plot is stopped dead. I'm looking at you, camping scene, and you, shopping scene. In a way, these moments work well as a point of catharsis, but for me, the action prior to them is just not exhausting enough to warrant such a long cooldown. Bear in mind, me saying the action isn't exhausting is not necessarily a bad thing. To somewhat quote Peter Griffin, it doesn't insist upon itself. We've got quality action in short bursts, which is exactly what a film like this wants.
Down the corridor, flat 157.
I think 28 Days is ironically the least zombie-driven film in the series, focusing more on being an analysis of human behaviour than anything else. This idea that the depraved survivors, the apex predators, are the real monsters is just a side to a situation like this that doesn't often get covered, and Christopher Eccleston plays the part of a closeted psychopath to perfection.
I moved us from the blockade, I set the radio broadcasting, and I promised them women.
Doctor Who? More like, who ordered this guy to eat up this role? I don't know why I said that. The thing that honestly gives this film the edge is the fact that it goes below the surface of what a traditional apocalypse film chooses to do. 28 weeks and years follow more conventional tropes, while this chooses to do something different. It chooses to carve its own distinctive path. And that's also the reason it stayed so culturally relevant for so long in such a saturated genre. In a way, the third act is just so action film coded in the sense that we've got a clear-cut villain with a group of henchmen and a lair. It's not just, oh no, zombies, let's run around for 2 hours. And that's something that I really appreciate. Obviously as well, I mean, I can't go a second without talking about it, the music. I know you're thinking, oh god, this guy, he's said In the House in a Heartbeat about 70 times this video, but we've got the debut of In the House in a Heartbeat. I mean, that ending sequence, as the tune is just thrashing, and we're seeing an almost deranged Cillian Murphy gouging the eyes out of a soldier, it is just quality cinema. As usual with this series, we've got a stacked cast putting up strong all-round performances, except for the child actress. Not to be a hater, you know, I'm sure she's trying her best, but she is clearly the weakest link in what is a very strong chain.
And we'll never be safe in the cities. The soldiers could keep us safe.
Take some inspiration from Alfie Williams, man. Up your game. But it is what it is. As should be in a zombie survival film, the infected look great, and our first introduction to them is truly scary.
Hello?
Like, oh my word. I also appreciate the fact that they're wearing clothes in this one. I was gonna say it makes it more of a fun family film, but then I remembered that Cillian Murphy just has all of his kit off at multiple points in this. It does seem slightly unnecessary, but you know, I'm sure it was part of Mr. Boyle's vision. Bit of a weird vision, but a vision nonetheless. But there we have it, that is my definitive ranking. I honestly love this series of films, and while they all have their imperfections, I can honestly say they comfortably rest at the top of the genre in my opinion. I'll be highly anticipating the Bone Temple's release next year, as I'm sure everyone else will. Let me know your thoughts of my ranking in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.